Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by my good friend John Bosch, and it's time for one of my favorite shows of the year. We're starting a new Dynasty League. Well, not really, but we're helping you if you want to start a new Dynasty League. John, thank you for being here. We did this last January. I really enjoyed it. Every time you're on, the first thing I ask, what's going on at Fantasy Cares?
All kinds of stuff. SFPL is going on right now. It's too late to get in it, really, but that's our big thing that we've got going on right now. For those that are following the Scott Fish Playoff League, it's our big fundraiser around this time of year, where basically it's one of those one and dones. You know, you get one player one time throughout the whole playoffs. Once you use that player, you can't use that player again. It's always fun to watch the strategy of those people that get the high scores early, but if you burn those players early, you might get burned real bad. And this year we've got, I don't think a lot of people were expecting, the Commanders to be around still.
Right.
So there's probably a whole lot of people a little worried that if they make the Super Bowl, they've got no shot to have Jaden Daniels at the end. They've already used them up. So it's fun. I like playoff fantasy. To me, it's just another way to play this fun game. So I play in a bunch of playoff fantasy. It's exciting.
Yeah, I would imagine there were a lot of people who planned on using the Detroit Lions and the Baltimore Ravens in the Super Bowl, and now they didn't get to use them at all. But the Chiefs and Bills are still around, so hopefully you choose correct in terms of which one of those teams is going to win those this week, so you can save the right guys for the Super Bowl. As always, we tell you all the time, go check out Fantasy Cares, see how you can get involved. Yes, the Scott Fish Bowl is probably the most well-known way. Throughout the year, we're doing all kinds of stuff to help raise money within this community. We get to play this fun game. We might as well do some good with it as well. On today's show, we are going to talk about
signing up for SFP 15.
You can sign up already. Yes, a lot of people already have, I'm sure. We're talking about setting up your first Dynasty League, and we'll talk about both maybe what rules we would suggest for someone who's never played Dynasty before, and also our favorite settings, which I like. Mine can get a little bit crazy. John's are just absolutely insane. I don't know. How many leagues are you currently the commissioner of, John?
I have currently commissioner of.
Yes.
I actually passed commissionership off of 2 leagues.
Okay.
So I think I'm down to commissioning like 14, but 2 of those leagues have within them like 9 leagues apiece. So,
like I said,
I don't know how to do the math, what it works out to be, but somewhere in there, 20, 30 leagues or something like that.
As I said, absolutely insane. We always start with 3 questions for our guest. I actually went back to last January and looked at the league specific questions that I asked you so that we could do something a little bit different on today's show. So I want to start first off with the idea of a constitution. And if you think, I'm not going to write out a constitution for my Dynasty League, this is a fantasy football league, I'm just trying to have fun, it will save you so much headache in the future when you're Adam Azer and you realize 2 years in that something's gone haywire that you never anticipated, and you can just go check what does the league constitution call for in this situation. So if you were giving somebody a template for putting together a Dynasty League constitution, what must it include?
Yeah, and I mean, for Dynasty, you have to have this. Redraft, you should have it. I mean, like, everybody should know the rules of every league they're playing in, even if it's just very, very basic things. But for Dynasty, because it gets a little bit more complicated, you're right, it is vital. I mean, the biggest thing you have to have, because most of these leagues involve money, define every bit of money extremely carefully. Make sure you know what the buy-in is. Make sure everybody knows what the buy-in is, how the money is going to be handled and where, when it's due, how it's going to be paid out exactly. I mean, all of mine literally break it down and show exactly what comes in and exactly what goes out. More often than not, if people are going to get upset in leagues, it's usually money involved. So if you define that money clearly and just get all that, that's the first thing that I really want to make sure is in there. it's not the first thing I do when I set up a league, because I don't really care about how much things are and stuff in leagues. That's not why I play, but I know it's an extremely important facet. So make sure you have that defined.
I do want to on the money point, and this first question may turn into a long one, but do you, like, I know you require league payment like pretty much as soon as the last season ended for the coming season. Also, what about when people are trading away first round picks?
Yep, I require that. So if you trade your future first, you've got to pay that year. So like right now in my leagues, you can trade your 2025s and 2026s because 2027s haven't opened yet. But if somebody were to pay their 2026, they would have to go pay their 2026 league fee. All of mine are on League Safe, so it's real easy. They just have to click a link and they can pay. It makes it real easy to track all the money for me.
Absolutely. Of course, you also have to worry about transaction details, what time of year you are going to allow transactions. Do you like to have a little dead period in the off season?
No. Like you said, I require my entry fees very early. That's because I pay out very quickly. As soon as week 17 now finishes, I mean, I get those payouts out within days. I was paid out this year within just a few days.
Right.
And then my league entry deadline just passed, like last week, I think it was, maybe Monday or something of last week. So my expectation is, look, if you're going to be in for 2025, we are in 2025. Let's go. Get the money all out of the way. Everybody get paid and let's move on. And people that don't pay, they get replaced. So that's why I like to move quickly, because we are about to enter actually one of my favorite parts of the dynasty season, which is dispersal season. I love it. It's when you get a second chance to fix your team if you really, really screwed it up. It's where new managers come in and you get that influx of activity and everything in the league. So to me, this is a time where I don't want to go to a dead period, to a dark period. The people that play in the leagues I run tend to be hardcore degenerates. So, and I love them for it. I love everybody out there that plays in my leagues, and you are hardcore degenerates. We don't want that. We don't want that time off. We don't want to wait between now and, the NFL draft before we think about our fantasy teams. We want to start planning now and playing now. We want to keep playing year round.
So that leads into my next question, because some people are going to hear this and think, man, I want to be in a dynasty league. I don't have 10 friends, or I don't have 10 friends who want to play dynasty fantasy football. How can people go find a dynasty fantasy football league?
Join my Discord server. No, for now, that is one way. But that's really social media at this point. Look on Blue Sky, look on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it.
Do you have openings in your leagues right now?
I don't. Mine are all closed. Like I said, my deadline, once the payment deadline passes, I start taking signups in my leagues, usually at the end of November, beginning of December. Like, I put out a big Google interest form and people fill it out, submit. And then when people tell me they're leaving, they get replaced. When people don't pay, they get replaced. I move quickly on it because I like to have it all done. I like to have the money part out of the way. I want to get the dispersals completed, everything done before my fantasy league rolls over, so that when it rolls over to the next year, it's a nice, clean, fresh start with everybody ready. So social media, look out there. There are plenty of managers out there. There's, forums on like DLF and things like that. Dynasty Nerds has a place where they look for, open teams and stuff like that. But anybody is welcome to join my Discord server at any time. We have a place in there with a lot of active managers and multiple commissions house their league chats there now. So
you have invited me to our league Discord chat, and the one league that I'm in, that you're the commissioner of, you have strongly suggested that anyone who's in the league join the Discord chat.
While also saying it's not required.
Right. It's not required. Just, you should do it, Heath. Heath, do it. And you know what? It's something new, and I haven't done it. I don't think I've ever posted anything on Discord. So I want you to just sell me on it right now. Why do I need to embrace Discord because you've gone with all of your leagues? This is your league chat tool. And I know I see more and more sites out there creating Discords for their site or for their personal self. Why? Why should I do this?
So for me as commish, the reason that I switched to Discord is we can blame Russ Fisher.
Okay.
Discord is how we do our Fantasy Cares communications.
Yes.
That is our communication channel, is Discord. So he forced it on me. He was right. It is actually a pretty effective communication tool. So once I got used to using it for that, then I realized, okay, I have chats, I have Twitter DMs, league DMs, I have Voxer chats, there's chats on GroupMe. There's probably other chat apps out there that house league chats. This year, I just put it all into one. I was like, I want everything in one place. For me as commish, it makes my job easier now. You know, I had a wonderful person help me set it up. Tyler Schmidt, thank you. He did a great job. So he set it up for me. Now from here, I can run it, and it gives me a lot more control over being able to get people in and out of the chats very easily. From a user perspective, what you'll see is the leagues that you're in, but then you'll also there's also a chat channel like that. All the managers in all my leagues, plus all the people in Matt Price's leagues and all the people in other commissions leagues, like everybody's there. So it ends up becoming this place where you can actually find good new leagues. You can find good new managers. That's one of my ultimate goals for it, because as things fracture in the social media world and split more and more, it becomes a little bit more challenging to have the conversations that we need to keep fantasy football thriving and growing in the dynasty perspective. So hopefully my Discord helps us all with that.
I'm going to give you a strong maybe. I'm going to give you a
All
strong
right.
maybe. I'm not committing. I am committing to taking our first break. And when we get back, we'll get into setting up first-time dynasty leagues. We are back. Jaquan says in the chat, Discord rocks. I am curious because I know I'm 100 years old, even though I'm only 45 or 46, one of those. I'm curious.
I will address what Jaquan said right before that too. He said he left the league because rule changes were given out over like text and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as someone that's in my leagues, you see a message board post if there's something important, and that's why I say, like, you're not required to join the chat. The chat is there, is fun, but it does help with, you know, explaining and people learning things and stuff like that too. But like no commissioner should ever rely solely on a third-party chat app to communicate vital, important information. That should all be posted on the league so that it sends an email out to every single person in the league. That's how I run mine, and that's what I recommend. There is vital communication should go through the league site.
So, and what happens is I join these group chats, and then 3 or 4 people go off on a tangent talking about things, and then I mute the notifications, and then I forget to ever go back. So like I said, I'm 100 years old. That's Heath. Let's talk about setting up a first-time dynasty league. And I think the first thing that people have to decide is, how do you acquire players? And I'm in one of your leagues that's called Auction Addicts. I'm not sure that you even have any leagues that are not auctions anymore, but I know that that's your preferred way. So we're going to do 2 things. One, I'm going to let you just have a little bit of space here to tell people why you prefer auctions over drafts. And then 2, we're going to talk about if you're in one of those leagues where everybody just wants to do a draft because it's quote unquote easier. You got a bunch of Heaths in your league, then we'll talk about the best way to do that as well. But sell everybody on auctions, John.
Yeah, I love auctions. I will not join any league that's not auction based or blind bid based, which is a really scary thing to do. But I won't do draft leagues anymore. It's just, if you're going to do a draft league, at least figure out how to determine the order off of anything that's not random.
Yeah.
Figure out any way to do it so that it's not randomized. I do not like random. Like random just drives me crazy. You know, oh, well, we ran it through a random number generator, and hey, you get the 7th pick in the startup. Like, well, you get the 5th pick in the second round. That's just not the same, because guess what? The advantage of the person at the 101 is they have access to the entire player pool, and they're the only one that gets to determine if somebody else gets that access. They're the only one that can trade it away. In an auction, everybody has access to everybody in the player pool. You just have to spend more. I mean, quite frankly, if you want it, you can go get it. You just have to spend more. You have to outspend. If somebody was willing to spend this much, and that's the 101 amount, you can easily go over that. You don't need their permission. So to make a trade to get to the 101 in Dynasty, you're relying on somebody else allowing you to make that trade. In an auction, that's not the case. You just have to outbid them. So I am full on auction. I mean, to me, it's way more fair. I don't like somebody getting an advantage over me at the start based off of anything random.
Jake one's just here in the chat to agree with everything you said. He says,
yeah, I like this Jake
rock
one.
to what's the, so the number one thing I hear from people is, yes, I agree. It's a better way to do it, but it takes too much time, but it's just too difficult to set up. So what is the easiest way, in your opinion, to get an auction set up? If somebody wants to do that for the first time, they're a little intimidated because they've only done drafts in the past. What's the easiest way to set that up so that everybody's kind of on even footing at the start?
So the first point of it takes way more time is totally false.
Okay.
That is totally false. If it takes too much time, it's because the settings were incorrect to begin with. So if you set up an auction with like a slow auction,
yep,
and there's a player up for 24 hours or something like that, that's a mistake. That is what it used to be back before we all lived on our phones constantly. My auction clocks now are usually 12 hours at the most. So setting it at 12 hours, it moves. People don't go more than 12 hours without checking in on the auction at this point. You wake up in the middle of the night, you check the auction. Like, that's just how it goes now. So we've gotten way away from where it used to be. It takes longer. So if you want it to, you can make an auction last as long as you want. You can make an auction go as fast as you want, as long as you're using the settings that are appropriate. There's a lot of different options. I use my fantasy league, like I said, because their auctions allow you to do a slow auction, which, every manager can put up a number of players. We have an auction board. There's anywhere between, 10, 12, up to 100 players on the auction board at any given time, which to me is nice. You get to see this whole puzzle of players. You kind of, for, the windows of where to bid and things like that. It's a good strategy puzzle for me. That's another reason that I love auctions so much. If you can do it, the best way to do it is live. Get your whole group together and one player up at a time, and you bid. That is the hands down best way to do it. That's harder to do, to get everybody to join together live and do it. And if you do that, you can do it in a day. It might take 5 or 6 or 7 hours, but it's going to be really, really fun. And I mean, a lot of fantasy drafts, if you're doing a dynasty fantasy startup, you did a draft live as well, that's going to take the same amount of time. I mean, it's a dynasty startup is going to take longer. People are going to want to talk about trades, so if you're live, it takes about the same amount of time. And you're taking way more than, 16 players like you would in redraft.
We do one redraft live auction a year with the CBS crew. And we try to do it as many people there in person but we can't get everybody. So we do it like we have the software to do a live auction online right there, 15-second clock to make bids. Yep. You can get it done in 3 hours, 2.5 hours for a redraft. You could get it done in 4.5 hours for a full dynasty. Whether you're doing an auction or a draft, though, I'm curious, how do you like to handle the rookies? Because I know some people will just put them in the mix with everybody and you just have one startup. I really like to have two, just because I think that drafting or auctioning, like either way, is the most fun part of fantasy football. And so the more we can do that, the better. But how do you like to have them all in one at once, or do you like to split it up?
So it depends. And I define it when I write, whenever I start a new league, I define it. There are times when I will include the rookies. There are times when I won't. Usually it's based on when is the startup. If the startup is before the NFL draft, usually I do a separate rookie auction after the fact. If the startup is after the NFL draft, then it's usually just all one pool, all run in together, everybody together. So it really, for me, it's defined by when the startup is.
You're starting a new league. It's 10 people, 12 people who have never played Dynasty before. How many roster spots?
I like 25 active roster spots. It's deep enough where you can keep some guys that are stashes a little bit. It's deep enough to make it so that I don't have to worry about waivers as much because I don't like waivers. So 25, with 12, that's a good player pool. But it's not so deep that you can't find a guy that you need to slot in just for a one game, appearance for some strange reason. And you can find some little waiver wire. So it gives a kind of a mix. I'm also, because I hate waivers so much, I don't mind going all the way to like a 40 roster spot. I would rather every single player be off of waivers. And if I want to get that player, I go and offer a trade rather than try and submit a waiver claim. For me, that's way more fun. That would be really deep if you're starting a brand new one. But brand new, I would say start somewhere between 25 and 30. And it depends on what your next question is, too. The taxi
injured
squad.
reserve and taxi/practice squad.
Yeah.
Do you have preferred limits for those two?
So injured reserve at this point, because I changed my IR rules when the NFL changed their IR rules. Back in the day when it was once you're determined IR, you're out for the year. That I only had, I think usually it was like 5 to 10. At this point now, players go on IR for 4 weeks and come back off. My leagues all have unlimited IR at this point. Yep. Look, if a guy's out for 4, 8, 12 weeks, I don't want you to have to make a transaction to cut that player or to cut another player because of that. So for me, it's just, go ahead and stash that guy on your IR, open that roster spot up to pull somebody off waiver wires or to trade for somebody and replace that player with. So unlimited IR for me. Taxi squads, I tend to do somewhere between 5 and 10. It depends on the league. I usually, like I said, since I go 25 to 35, somewhere in that 5 to 7 is really my sweet spot. A little bit more than
now, I've played in leagues where this is different. When you say taxi squad, are you limiting that to rookies?
So most of my leagues are limited to rookies. I have a couple where it's the first 2 years, which are really interesting. I kind of prefer the first 2 years. It allows you to stash more players. There's other ways to do the taxi where like people can poach them in their second year and take if they're not on, if they haven't been promoted yet. So that adds, if you can get to that kind of a detail, that adds some intrigue to the taxi squad rather than it just being a player that people stash. But for me, 2 years is my preferred. Most of my leagues are 1 year because that's pretty standard. Rookies only, for 1 year. And that's real easy to set up everywhere.
I want people who are hearing John talk about like the number of roster spots and people that you allow people to stash makes the waiver wire worse. So if you're someone like him who doesn't really like waivers, and I think what you'll find is that generally speaking, people who play in more than 5 or 10 leagues are the people who hate waivers because it takes them an hour or 2 or 3 on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. And people who play in 5 or fewer leagues really love waivers and see it as a good strategical part of the game. And yes, I agree with all of you. So if you are somebody who likes waivers more, you might want to look at something like 20 roster spots with 2 taxi squads. Mm-hmm. I think that's our YOLO IDP league is very unique because it's IDP also. And John is not a big IDP guy. Nope. I love IDP. I'm going to be writing later today about my favorite dynasty settings, and IDP will be in there. But we have 28 roster spots, I believe, and 2 taxi squads and 5 injured reserve. But like, there's just a lot of ways to manipulate it. You just have to know what the changes you are making. Like, I know a lot of times, especially early in my dynasty playing, I would make a change or set up a rule a certain way and didn't really understand what the impacts of that rule were going to be. And then you get 3 or 4 years in and you're like, oh, well, that's not what we intended for to happen. So more roster spots, worse waivers. It makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I wasn't sure. I think I know what you'll do here, but I was going to give you a chance if you want to sell people on best ball, because I know some people I hear say best ball is just taking some of the skill out of it, like choosing the right guys to start each week. And I understand that as well. What are your selling points for best ball?
So I like both. I
Uh-huh.
I like the lineup setting. I hate setting my individual lineup because I'm terrible at it. But that's a personal thing that I'm just bad at. So I also like the best ball because that eliminates that. And all of a sudden that's just about roster building for me. So, but I do like to have a mix. In my league portfolio, I like to have a mix. So, setting the lineup, you're right. It's a skill. It's one of the things I'm deficient in. There are other people that are better at it, but it also brings in a lot of variance. If a guy just gets hurt, which is really frustrating to me, a guy gets hurt in the first quarter of a game and you started him and he can't score any more points the rest of the game, things like that. What I've really come around to is what Ryan McDowell has started with some of his most recent leagues is kind of a mix where instead of full best ball or full lineup setting, you end up putting like 15 people on an active roster and then like 12 of them start based on the best 12 scoring. So
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it's really intriguing to me because I understand that not everybody's going to like a full best ball and not everybody's going to like a full lineup setting. So I never instituted that in any of my leagues, but playing in them, it's extremely fun because you still have to make the decisions then. So they're still at the decision points, but then you do get some of the insulation from if a guy gets injured or if a guy just has a terrible game. Like sometimes that happens and it's not really your fault that you started him. It was the right process and the wrong result. It kind of minimizes a little bit of that variance. So I'm really enjoying that setup a lot.
I like that. I sent John a fairly long rundown of questions, but I told him there's no telling what direction we're going to go. And I'm seeing some questions that I really like in the chat. So we're just going to go that direction for a while. Mel in the chat says, with unlimited IR spots, how do you control the team who will hoard players? Because when they're listed as out, they can go in an IR spot, or do you just change the setting? And I think it's very important if you're going to have unlimited IR spots that they must actually be on injured reserve or PUP. Do you agree with that?
Yep, that's how mine are all set. Mine are all set for IR only. If you're on injured reserve, you've got to be on NFL injured reserve. It's not just out for a game. So that's a setting.
Right.
And you can, if you choose the other setting, like that's fine too. I don't have, a big dislike for allowing guys that are declared out to be slotted on the IR.
Just don't have unlimited spots if you do that.
I don't even mind. The big thing to do with unlimited spots is you have to make a rule that you can't pull a player off a waiver wire and put that player on your IR. Because then there are people that just go and grab every single IR player off the waiver wire, even if this player's never going to play like ever for them, they will do it because why not? If it's there to allow it. So basically I have a rule in place where while we have unlimited IR, that player must be coming from your active roster. They cannot be picked up and then put on IR. If you pick them up while they were on IR, they are not IR eligible on your roster. So they must be on your roster when they go on IR.
Hypothetically, no best ball in a league. So you're just how many starters would you have and what positions would they be?
Depends on the team number for me. I like the league member number, I should say.
Let's say it's 12.
Number 12 teams. For me, that would probably be 10 or 11. I like to have a deep lineup. Again, I play with deeper rosters. So if you're going to have players on your team, you better be putting them to work at some point. If you go with something small, it really lends to just get studs and duds, go completely studs and duds. I try to target like 120 to 140 starters total among the league. So if you've got a 10-team league, 12 to 14 starters. If you've got a 12-team league, 10 or 11 starters, somewhere in that range, 120 to 140 starters. If you look at that on a week-to-week basis, and I mean, we don't play defense kicker in my leagues. So you're looking at just quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. That number, the 120 to 140 each week, seems to be a number that every once in a while you're going to have to slot in some guys that you were not planning on having to start. The bye-apocalypse hits and there's six good teams on bye. That decreases that pool real fast. So all of a sudden to get to that 120 starters, you see some names that you don't normally see. But to me, that's kind of fun. There's a reason that you want to build those players at the bottom of your roster. And it gives you that motivation because there are going to be weeks where you have to slot them in then. So for me, somewhere that's what I try and target, 120 to 140 total starters per week.
Let's go back to the chat. We had a question. As a commish, do you allow for the league to vote if you change roster size? And I think something I've become more aware of the further I get into this game is like changing any rule in a dynasty league is really difficult. So you can answer this specific question, but like, are you requiring pretty much unanimous approval to change rules? Or are you just doing it as a commissioner, whatever you want? How is it? Should a dynasty rule changes happen?
My leagues are not a democracy. I do have rule change rules in my rules. So, but mine say, you know, basically a rule change is defined in my rules, whereas I can act laterally if I see that it's the best thing for the league. There are some things where I'll throw it out in the chat and just have a discussion about it, try to gauge feedback, see what the league wants to do about something. I don't change a lot of rules. I did change the trade deadline universally in all my leagues years ago because I had played when I first set them all up. They all had a trade deadline. Then I played in leagues without trade deadlines, and I saw firsthand, okay, this is better. But I also know this is like a 50-50 split.
Right.
You can poll anybody, and it's always going to come up. Some people love trade deadlines. Some people hate them. I wanted them out of my leagues after witnessing what happens in leagues without them. So I just unilaterally removed them. I announced it. I told everybody, and I said, you know, I understand if this changes how you feel about this league. That's fine. I get it, but I'm running the league, and I want the league to be what I want it to be. So that's where I start. Now, I try not to be a jerk about any of it. Like I said, I usually do throw it out there, and I get discussion, gauge it, have a chat. There are some things where I will put it to a vote. If it's something that I don't think either way is going to really kind of affect the outcome of the league one way or another, but it feels like it's really, really split, I will put it up for vote. If it's changing a rule that's already in place, I think I have them all defined based on how many it is. It's usually like 8 out of 12. If it's a 14-team league, like it's a 9 out of 14. It's not a simple majority. Like to change something that we vote on, you have to have like a super majority, essentially. If it's something that's not defined, which is what we come into, that's usually where there's rule changes. It's right. Something that's not defined in the bylaws. Something happened and we weren't expecting it. Like when, COVID hit and there was massive changes to bylaws there that like we couldn't vote on all this stuff. I just had to figure out what do I want to do in my leagues. The unfortunate and fully fortunate scenario with DeMar Hamlin, like that was something. Right. I didn't have anything in my rules about that. Like right. a game just like something like this happens. You can't have planned for everything. But I stole a rule from Scott Fish years ago that basically says if something unforeseen happens, the commission will act in the best interest of the league. It is the best interest clause. And I've had to invoke it multiple times in that kind of a scenario where like, look, I didn't know this was coming. There's no way to do that. So more often than not, like the rules don't change. It's more in addition to a rule or something like that. If it's something vital to the league, changing one QB to super flex, things like that, the league has to vote on that. Right. I'm not making that kind of a decision because that changes the entire setup of a league. So, and in that case, obviously, you should just start a new league.
I think that one specifically, the one QB to super flex, is just almost impossible unless you want to set it for 5 years down the road or something. Joe brings up something I think will be real short, but one of my favorite settings is the additional matchup against league median. 100% agree, Joe. Really like that rule. Hard to even find an argument against it. I want to get to a few more questions here before we get to our second break. We'll go a little bit more rapid fire on this. Any preference on when to do rookie drafts or auctions?
For me, it's after the NFL draft. I want as much information to be known as possible because I think it allows the managers to make more informed decisions. I am intrigued by watching those leagues that do it before the NFL draft. Yeah. I think you've got to have a unique group of individuals that want to do that. Because you can see a player's value just completely tank, or skyrocket. Honestly, like they're playing with fire, and there's an appeal to that for me. So I get it. I would say from a standard perspective, do it after the NFL draft, because NFL draft stock is a huge factor in dynasty value. What team somebody goes to, where they get drafted,
Right.
the NFL is telling us what they think about a player. They do a lot more research, and they are probably, not always, probably in most cases, a little better at this than we are. Or they're at least going to tell us who they think they're going to be better
Right.
at. And then that player gets the opportunity and everything way more. So it's information. I want my managers to be informed. I want to be informed when I'm playing in them. But I do see the intrigue of the high risk, high reward before the NFL draft. It's a different kind of league, and it takes a special group. But if you've got it, enjoy it.
Well, I think that's a good point. Like, just to remember, if you know, we're going to answer a few more chat questions after the break. And I've seen some about like less fantasy inclined friends. And if you know you have one of those leagues, then some of the crazy things that John and I like, you probably should not do. You may even want to have if you've got a league where you've got 2 or 3 guys who really just pay a lot more attention and try a lot more than everyone else, then you may want to have a little period during the offseason where you're not allowing ad drops so that those 2 guys don't just stack their roster with every player that should be picked up during that period of time. 3 more rapid fire questions before we get to the break. What percentage of the league should make the playoffs?
For me, it is less than 50%.
Okay.
However you define it, I do not like half the league making the playoffs. So in a 12-team league, that makes it really tough. I would figure out a way to do a 5-team playoff and give the number 1 seed a bye. I know in a 12-team league, like 6 is pretty standard, and I've even got a 12-team league where 6 make it because it's just what works. But that's why I like a 14-team league better. 14-team league, 6 make the playoffs.
I understand why you don't like the 50%, and I think inherently I agree with it, but I love a 14-team league where 7 make it because that 1 seed is so much more valuable. And I think that being the best team through the regular season in pretty much all fantasy football leagues is undervalued. And you can fix that with the next question is what's your preferred way to chop up the money that's involved in terms of percentages going to first, other things like high point, or like what do you like to pay out for?
Everything. Like I said, but this is why I define exactly how the money gets allotted in my leagues, because I like a lot of people winning money. Right. Quite frankly, it makes it easier for manager retention as a commissioner. So I love a weekly high score award. It doesn't have to be a lot. Everything depends on what you're buying, obviously, is, and how much money is in the pot, how much you have to go around. But if you're playing in a $100 league and you've got $1,200 to go around, the winner of the league doesn't have to get $900 to care. If the winner of the league gets $750, they're still going to like winning that league.
Well, and they're probably going to have some high points too if they win the league.
Correct. They're probably going to win some other things along the way. But, putting in a weekly prize of $5 to $10 for just being the weekly high score, it keeps people motivated the entire year. It gives just a little bit of a drive. I like a yearly high score. I like paying out the runner-up. Third place, if you miss the finals, I don't really like paying out third place. If you're going to do it, make it just the buy-in.
I'm not even saying that you have to agree with me if you're listening to this or that this is the right way to do it. I'm just expressing my opinion. I do not want to play any more fantasy football matchups after I've lost in the playoffs. I'm mad. I don't even want to look at that team for a few weeks. Just leave me alone. I don't want to play in a loser's bracket. I don't want to play for third place. I'm done.
Do you know what happens in a third place game? Even if you win it, you know what you instantly do? Would I have won the championship?
Yep. I don't even want to see my roster. I do not want to look at the score.
And you're looking at the score of the championship game. And if you would have hit, it makes it worse. I don't want my $50 back. I don't care. You're right.
I won third place in a league. I was the returning champion. I made it to the semifinals. I lost to a 12-year-old in the semifinals who has won the league like 3 times now. And so I was knocked out by him. And then I had to play in the third place game. I won $75 or something. I don't know. Yay. But I had to watch as I outscored both teams in the championship by 60 points in the final week, and I was so mad about it. So yes, that would be my advice: is don't make people play beyond that. But that's one of the other reasons that I like the 14 and 7 is if you give a bonus just for getting to the semifinals, then whoever wins the regular season has automatically got that bonus. And I guess if you give up 2 buys, then just first and second automatically get that bonus for finishing as a top 2 team. I'm okay with that as well.
Structure as well. A lot of the leagues that I've started to play in now, the Ryan McDowell leagues, which are insanely commish heavy, and even leagues that I've more recently started, they're multi-copy leagues that end up being 42 teams, 60 teams, stuff like that. So there's a lot of teams. And in leagues like that, then there's a lot of money to go around. At that point, then it is, hey, if you make the playoffs, you're getting a payout. Like, I love that structure. It's a lot harder to do that in a 12-team league where 6 teams make the playoffs. But if you've got a massive league and you're playing in one of those, I think you pay for everything you advance. You advance out of the regular season, you're getting a prize. You advance out of the first week of the playoffs, you're getting a prize. Like, I love that payout structure a lot.
And then finally, what should determine who makes the playoffs? We talked about league median scoring. Some leagues just have one matchup every week where you're playing head to head. So should points come into play? How do you determine who makes the playoffs?
So this is where I justify allowing 50% of the teams in the playoffs in the 12-team league that I run that has 6 teams in, because you should never. The first thing you should scratch out of your rule book, if you've got it in there, is the top 6 with the best record get in. That's terrible. There are playing against the median is huge. That allows for an extra win a week. There's things like victory points where you can set up where, you can play against the median and you get victory points. I think that's how Auction Addicts is set up, where if you get a win, you get 2 points. If you beat the median, you get 2 points. If you tie, you get 1 point. Actually, I think Auction Addicts it's a 3-tiered not median. So if you're in the top third, I think you get 2 points. If you're in the middle third, you get 1 point. And if you're at the bottom third, you get 0 points. So there's systems that you can set up to basically give people a reason to play more than just the head-to-head. If it is something like just a singular head-to-head matchup schedule, I do like double headers too, though. But if it's singular head-to-head, my playoffs will be set up. First seed is best record. Second seed is the top point performer that did not get in yet. And then I rotate back and forth. So I go record, points, record, points, record. My 6th seed is the best all play record. A lot of sites will track that. They will track the all play record. So if you played every single team every single week, it'll show you that report. So that's what the 6th seed is reserved for mine. So it goes record, points, record, all play record. For me, I feel like I almost always get the 6 best teams in. There are times where you see somebody that was, in the standings, they show in the top 6, they get bumped out. I have seen teams that have been bumped up quite a bit. And it's almost inevitably, just because if you go back and you look at their schedule, every week, they were just that team every week where they scored a lot. They got outscored by somebody that just happened to score more. Or they were an okay team, but they managed to play the team that had their best week of the season repeatedly. So it takes out, again, variance. Not a fan. It removes a lot of that variance if you don't base your playoffs just on best record, which you shouldn't.
Let's take a short break and we'll wrap things up here on FFT Dynasty. So we're going to talk about favorite scoring settings. I'll give some of mine. We'll ask John what he wants to add to that. But first, I wanted to ask you a question, because I see a lot of times in leagues, it seems like the scoring settings are set up in a way to make it to where the positions are more equal. You see that with tight end premium scoring. We saw it with only giving 4 points per pass touchdown. I think it was one of the justifications originally for PPR scoring. Is that the point of scoring, or is it to more accurately reflect their value to an NFL team?
I think part of the goal was in trying to make the scoring settings make every position equal, is to just have it so that we can play, however we want. Like with the pieces all end up being the same. That is how most of my leagues are set up. So I can't say that it's wrong, but also like I don't care
Right.
if there is a league setting that just makes quarterbacks the most valuable thing. So what? Then everybody knows quarterbacks are the most valuable. So as long as everybody knows what the settings are, even if they don't know it the first year, they're probably going to learn it by the end of the year, and they'll have to adjust then. There's really nothing you can do to make the wrong, just straight scoring settings. No matter what it is, it's uniform across the league. As long as you're not trying to like hide something, as long as it's published and it's out there, everybody has the information. Everybody can look at how it's going to affect every single player at every single position and go ahead and compare it at that point. Like, yeah, this is a good point. I like it when QBs and defenses score a little bit more. But to that point, should a defense in fantasy score be as valuable as a quarterback? Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it reflects the NFL right now, although a good defense is nice to have. Having that good quarterback, it seems to be way more important. So
Right. And I think like one of the things, and I'll just go through my scoring settings. Like this is, I think if I start a new league this year, and I've told myself I'm not going to because I'm cutting back leagues, but that never actually works. My ideal settings would be 6 points for all touchdowns, rushing,
like
passing, receiving, 0.1 for all yards, rushing, receiving, kick returns, including negative 0.1 for sack yards lost. We need to start penalizing these quarterbacks. Sacks are a quarterback stat more than they are an offensive line stat. Offensive lines matter too, but we're going negative 0.1 for quarterbacks.
You're giving 0.1 for passing?
I'm sorry. I apologize. We're going to, good point. I'm not going to do that.
I was like, if I'm in this league, I am going QBX to infinity.
We'll go 0.04, the standard 0.04 on QB. Okay. I am going a half point per rushing and receiving first downs.
Yep.
I am going full PPR with a 1 point bonus on tight end receptions, but not the first downs, just the receptions. 14 teams, 7 make the playoffs. And then I do like IDP. I like full IDP because I'm insane, but at least 2 defensive linemen, at least 2 linebackers, at least 2 defensive backs. 1 point per tackle, 2 points per sack, 1 point per tackle for loss, 3 points for interception, 1 point per pass defensed, 2 points for forced fumble, 2 points for fumble recovery. John just completely blanked out during all of my IDP discussion because he's not going to do that. But in terms of the offensive scoring, John, any feedback, anything that I'm missing that you like to add?
No, that's pretty close. I actually do 0.75 points per reception in my leagues because I'm okay with half PPR. I'm okay with full PPR. I'm okay with both. So guess what I did when I started making leagues? I just split the difference and went with 0.75. It works out really nicely. Players that have a bunch of catches, look, that is helpful in the NFL game. So it's helpful in the fantasy game. Yardage wise, I think we're pretty in lockstep there. I don't have return yards in my leagues. I kind of wish I did because I like when those players get a little bit of a bonus. It helped out Debo in 1 or 2 weeks this year, like hugely. Big help there. So I kind of like that because it gives some of those wide receivers that you might not normally start, gives them a chance to score some points if you have to force them in there. So I don't have return yards, but I like it. Points per first down is huge. When on this sheet that you sent me, and you're like, what are the most important? Points per first down is massive. Not enough leagues have that, and it should be a standard setting. It's more important than what the PPR setting is.
It is
0 PPR, whatever, that's fine. But at this point, you should be awarding points for first downs. I tend to do half point for a receiving first down, just because I don't do full PPR. So it's kind of like a little bit scaled off of that. A lot of times I do a 1/4 point for a rushing first down, and then 1/10 of a point for a passing first down. So the quarterbacks get a little bit too if they make that throw past the sticks. Throw it short of the first down on third down, people. Give me that first down. So it's kind of a tiered system for how I award the first down scoring. And then I do bump the tight ends. People just love tight end premium. I am an advocate that tight end premium doesn't matter unless it makes a player flexible. It doesn't matter. If you're only comparing them to your tight ends at their position, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think the only way I would argue with you is I think right now in Dynasty, it has a huge impact on Bowers and McBride because they catch so many more passes than the other tight ends. They become
already so good,
even more value. Like they're clear first round picks in tight end premium leagues and Dynasty leagues right now. Whereas Bowers might be in just regular leagues. McBride certainly probably not. But no, I think that's a good point. I wanted to ask you. I
compare it to tiger proofing golf courses, and they were like, "Well, let's just make it so many yards now because he can hit it so much further." All that did was benefit him,
right?
And so for me, tight end premium, it just makes Bowers even more valuable. He's already super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to give you a second,
like a sticky worth anything still.
What's your favorite crazy league right now?
My favorite crazy league it's Ryan McDowell's. It's not even one of mine. It's just my favorite things league. It has just about everything. And I mean, Ryan is pretty infamous at this point. He started the kitchen sink leagues, which were everything but the kitchen sink, hence the name. But my favorite things, when he messaged me and we started talking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, Ryan, I want to play in this league. I do not want to have anything to do with running it because it is so commission intensive. The big things with that, and he's got another league called Death Becomes You. There's vampires in them. So if vampire leagues have become like my new addiction, if people don't know what a vampire league is, basically the team starts from way behind the eight ball. They get an auction budget of, I think it was like 10% of what everybody else got. So, and they get no future draft picks. So in one of them, I'm the vampire, and then in another league, I'm one of the mortals. So I get to play it from both sides. And it's really intriguing because if the vampire wins, they get to steal a player off that roster that they beat. So there's a lot of strategy in choosing your matchups, which we do on a weekly basis. Every week, there's no set schedule. There's a call out order. So you choose who you're playing. That's really what it's so beyond like
I said, I asked for a crazy league. I got a crazy league. That's I always know I can do this once a year, and you've got 25 years worth of crazy leagues that you can go through for us. So I do appreciate that. We had one more question from Garrett in the chat. Started my first Dynasty league last year with apparently less fantasy inclined friends. Any fun ideas to boost in and out of season engagement?
This is the age-old question of how do I make inactive people active? Change the people. You can't change people. You can change the people. You can't force activity. There's all kinds of things you can do, and I'll give you a couple of ideas. I do them in mine. We have fun with them, but the active people have fun with them. The people that aren't active, they ignore them because that's just what happens. There's really nothing you can do to force somebody to be active. You can try, you can institute like trade requirements and things like that. But people either don't do them and leave the league and hate it because of it, or they just do just the bare minimum to like get to the rule. And so they don't get kicked out of the league. So to me, those don't really force the activity. A big key is choosing the right managers to start. That is always key. A couple of things that I do in mind that, again, the active managers in mind, I do tend to have fairly active managers because I recruit at the end of the fantasy season. And that's the only people that are looking to join leagues in December are people that are really looking to join leagues in December right after the rest of everything is out. So that's one of the reasons I recruit for my leagues at that time. I know I'm getting managers that they don't want to break. They want to constantly do something.
Right.
In my leagues, we do in February. That tends to be kind of the dead period because dispersal season's over at that point. We haven't really gotten to the point where we're talking about like heavy into the rookie season yet, so we do a best ball draft or a best ball auction in mine, sometimes. But Basically, it's just something we give a little bonus. It's never anything big. A lot of them are just bankroll leagues where you get an extra like $5 of bidding money or something like that. So there's no real prize. It's just some sort of an activity for the league to get together, do a draft at the beginning of the season. The rookies aren't on their NFL teams yet, so it gives every one of my managers a chance to kind of start looking at some names they might not have seen yet. And I've gotten the feedback that people like that. They like having to, it kind of forces them to jumpstart.
Right.
But then they're a little bit ahead in their other leagues, they've told me. So it's a really nice little activity thing right there. We do another best ball league in July or August, kind of after we've kind of all waited. And at this point now, like training camps kicking off, people are getting excited and they want to just do something. Rather than start a new league, we can just do another little best ball where we give another little prize. Those are really like the most successful things I've ever had.
Right.
Where you can throw in like kind of increase activity artificially.
So I think something you do in some of, at least one of your leagues, is I think you have a deadline of maybe the day after the Super Bowl or a week after the Super Bowl where you have to get your roster legal again, because people have taxi squad players that are going to have to come off. People have IR players that are going to have to come off. So you're going to have to cut a bunch of players to get to legal again going into the next season. And then you can have a vet auction or a vet draft in March. Yep. And then I think one of the other things is that by limiting activity for a certain period of the summer, especially like maybe after the rookie draft until training camp starts, you can create a little bit of excitement around the first free agency period of the preseason. And so that can get people involved. Like, you haven't been able to add anybody for 3 months. You may even get some people messaging you, hey, when can we add people? Like, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So if it's open all year long and they're just getting emails every 3 months to tell them that, oh, Joe just picked up another player that I should have known was available, and now I feel bad about myself as a fantasy football manager, I'm not sure that works. But if you can limit their activity for a month or two where they're not allowed to do anything, then they might be more willing to get involved. We're gonna have to limit the rest of the show, John, because we are rapidly approaching an hour. This tends to happen when you and I get together. I always love having you on, enjoy talking to you. Again, I'd remind people, go check out fantasycares.org. Go follow John on Blue Sky at John Bosch, and he will be promoting all kinds of stuff, the ways you can get involved with the Scott Fish Bowl and other things. Thank you for being here today, John.
Thanks for having me, as always. It is always fun. This is, you know me, this is like, I'm not going to talk about players because I don't do that kind of research, but I will talk about leagues forever, because to me, this is, I'm a gamer. I like games. I like puzzles. I like things like that. So this is what makes my brain work and go crazy, is finding a new way to just play a strategy game that involves football.
I also wanted to thank Thomas. Thank you to the YouTube chat. You guys giving us the questions. Everybody listening. Wanted to remind you that I will be doing a one-man mailbag at the very end of the month, prioritizing those 5-star reviews over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So get those in, get your questions in. I'll answer as many of them as I can. And if I can't get to them on the pod, maybe we'll do a special article as well. We will talk to you on Friday.